DeSantis versus FAUCIAN dystopia. Fed money printing suggests the COVID policy era still hasn't ended. Marking the third anniversary of the 15 days to slow the spread COVID slogan from President Donald Trump and Dr. Anthony Fauci, Governor Ron DeSantis, FLA, on Thursday noted the destruction caused by pandemic lockdowns and mandates, and Florida's determination to resist them. But this week's actions at the Federal Reserve suggest that the era of emergency still hasn't ended. As for the political panic over COVID that began in 2020, Max Greenwood reports in The Hill. Florida, we played an important role over the last 3 years, DeSantis said at an event in Winter Haven, Florida, to mark the third anniversary of the pandemic's onset. I think we were one of the first states to see the experts were getting it wrong, and we resolved to charge a different course, he continued. We are not going to let this state descend into a FAUCIAN dystopia, not on our watch. A press release from the governor's office argues. Despite pseudoscientific policies from the federal government, Florida's common-sense approach allowed Florida to thrive. In 2022, Florida had the largest net migration in the country and set an all-time record for tourism with 137.6 million visitors. Additionally, Florida's gross domestic product increased by 24% between the first quarter of 2020 and the third quarter of 2022, outpacing the nation by 23%. Florida recognized the importance of in-person learning for students. While other states locked the doors of their schools, Florida was the first state in the nation to mandate in-person learning for students and welcome students back into the classroom. This column was a lockdown skeptic right from the start of the COVID panic and an early Fauci skeptic as well. Governor DeSantis for his part was among the earliest governors to recognize the failings of the panicked COVID consensus and became the most forceful advocate for allowing an open society to prosper while focusing on protection of the most vulnerable. Looking back, it's hard to believe how many media and political players bought the idea that one could shutter much of society and then try to simulate prosperity with trillions in government spending and money creation at the Federal Reserve, and then expect a positive result. Of course, Joe Biden and the Fed inflamed the problem by continuing the binge of spending and money creation long after the economy had begun to rebound. This led to inflation and now to banking tumult from higher interest rates as the Fed finally started to tighten monetary policy. But even though anyone can now recognize how bad the outcomes were for the country when policymakers listened to Dr. Fauci and experts in public health, which is a failed discipline, one could argue that Faucian economics continues. The failure of a few banks has inspired the Fed to bail out the undeserving and also to crank up the money printing once again at a breakneck pace. The Fed just did massive QE is the headline on a note to clients today from SMBC economist Joe Livorna, who writes. Last night the Fed published its H.4.1 release. This is the report that provides a weekly snapshot of the Fed's balance sheet for the week ending Wednesday. So, we have what the Fed balance sheet looks like as of March 15th, and boy was it a doozy. The Fed effectively just did $318 billion of quantitative easing, QE. Yes, you read it correctly. The Fed effectively added $318 billion in reserves to the financial system. It is no wonder that risk assets responded as they did. Once again, the system is awash in liquidity. Will the government-created emergency ever end? DeSantis versus FAUCIAN dystopia. Fed money printing suggests the COVID policy era still hasn't ended. Marking the third anniversary of the 15 days to slow the spread COVID slogan from President Donald Trump and Dr. Anthony Fauci, Governor Ron DeSantis, FLA, on Thursday noted the destruction caused by pandemic lockdowns and mandates, and Florida's determination to resist them. But this week's actions